unit that I was with was specifically for direct action hostage rescue, counterterrorism, counterinsurgency. What we did was specific high value targets within Iraq, targeting primarily Al Qaeda and the facilitators of Al Qaeda. And we'd have a target package. We'd go in, snatch them up, and bring them back, for questioning, or take them out, however is needed.
It's rare to meet people who are really elite in martial arts, and it's rare to meet people who are really elite in the military. So someone who's both, like you, is, even rarer still. So if you don't mind taking you back to when you started, because you enlisted in the US Army in 95, is that right?
Correct.
And so what age were you then?
So I joined in 19.
19.
So I was actually raised overseas until I was 18. I spent a year kind of traveling around the US because I never lived here. So I got to spend about a year traveling around, and then decided to join the Army at 19 and was a lightweight vehicle mechanic starting out. I'm stationed at Fort Hood in Texas. That's how I ended up here.
And at what stage in your Army career did it become clear that you had maybe what it took to get as far as the Special Forces?
I think the day I graduated.
The day you graduated, as in, what does that mean? Graduated from one step from the...
No, that's the thing, is that there's so many different variables within the Q course that are out of your control. Injury is the big thing. So you could be a complete stud and be flying along, and then, injury will take you out. That was my biggest fear. I didn't really have any other doubts at that time. But my confidence did grow after I made the first part, which was selection. So Special Forces assessment and selection is the very first part. And that's basically to weed everybody out so you qualify for the qualification course. So once I finished selection, there was a surge of confidence, like, okay, I can do this. But I wasn't confident enough to, I don't want to count my eggs before they've hatched. So I always kind of kept that in reserve, kind of like, I got it, but I need to keep my head focused because there's a lot coming up.
And what do you need to have got to that stage? Because you talk about selection, and it sounds like you got to that pretty easy. What attributes do you need at that point?
Honestly, it's a mental game. I went through selection. I was actually just talking about this a couple of days ago. I remember there was a guy there, Michael Sands, I believe. And he was just a freaking anomaly. The guy was about 115 kilos. I mean, just ripped. But he was able to, he was running like 6-minute miles. I mean, on the ruck, it didn't even look like he was carrying anything. About 2 weeks in, I see him, in the little area that they have for people that quit. And I mean, so I've seen people that were much, much better physically quit the course. And I also remember one of the guys that I went through, forgot his name now. This was like 20 years ago, but he was a little guy, maybe about 5'7", 150 pounds, and he had broken several bones in one foot and a couple in the other. Had some knee issues, and I remember seeing in the sand like a step and a drag mark, and he just trucked. I mean, he wasn't the fastest, but he did finish all the way through. The mental aspect of it is about 70%, if not more. So you have that will to complete it. It's going to go a lot more than your physical attributes. But
presumably there's a kind of base level of physical athleticism that you need, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
But going in, you kind of already knew that you had that.
Yes.
And then it's the stuff they throw at you later. So what makes people break then? If it's 70% mental, what is it that's making people break?
It's not one event. And that's the hard thing to kind of wrap your mind around. It's one event after another, after another, after another, after another, after another, and it doesn't seem to end. And the way they design it is intended like that. So you had these guys that were mentally and physically ready, but once the physical aspect hit them, they crumbled mentally. And you could physically see that. You could see that they were defeated before they even started the next event. Just to give you an example, especially like team week, we'd have approximately 65 pounds of weight on our back from start to finish, from the beginning of the course to the end after we did our admin. And so your rucksack was on you the whole time. And then you had to move to your event, which was approximately 7 kilometers that you had to navigate to. So if you take the wrong direction, or someone that's doing your lab supposed to get you there, it's going to start wearing on you because you're doing more than you're supposed to. They're all timed events. You're always being assessed. And so when you start kind of making one mistake, if you can't just let it go and move forward, that's going to stay with you and it's going to start eating you up. The big thing was, 7 kilometers there, you have whatever event, it lasts between 8 to 10 kilometers, and then another 7 kilometers, 8 kilometers to the next event. And you'd have on average 2 events a day. And this was every day. And then because you're in a team, once you start your team, you're going through all events together. If some of those guys quit, the events and the standards for those events don't change. Even if you have 8 guys, which ended up having 7 guys at the end, but they don't like throw in somebody else to make up that lost person. So when you have, for example, the log carry, it was 1,000 pounds on average, one of those shorter telephone poles. You had to carry that from point A to point B. If you have 12 people, everyone's distributing that weight evenly. When you have 7 people, you're doing the same thing, but each person's carrying drastically more on top of the rucks. And so it makes it drastically harder to continue doing these events. That was, to me, one of the biggest things that I noticed people getting worn on was they would do fine on one event, but by the 3rd, 4th, 5th event, that's where people really started to kind of like, you could see it in their motivation was gone. Their willingness to continue started to disappear. And it's just so easy to quit. And it's so tempting because you can have this end at any point in time, just saying, I quit. And the problem with it is that one moment in time where you say you quit, when you talk to other people that say that, it's like your biggest regret in their life. And once you quit, you're considered an NTR. So NTR is a never to return. So you'll never get a chance to come back.
So it's as simple as, in one moment you can think, right, I've had enough, and you say you quit, and that's it. There's no sort of, I didn't mean it, I'm all right now. You say the word and you're out. Is that it? That's the way it works?
That's it.
How close did you get?
Let's see, probably about 9 times.
Over how long a period of time is all these events? I like the way you call them events. They sound like jolly days out, but they're presumably pretty horrible. Over how many days is this series of events?
So you have the first week, which is basically like your PT test, making sure that you have your admin work, and they do like a refresher on orienteering, which is land navigation. You do your individual tested by the second week, which is pretty much like a gut test, gut check, trying to make it to your events by yourself and to build up for what's called the STAR course. The STAR course is a land navigation test that they put you through, where everyone has a random set of points that they have to make within a certain time frame. In that one event alone, so we started out with 458 people. That one event actually eliminated like 150 something people. Your confidence builds once you make it through that, and then when you get to team week, it starts all over again, but as a team. So you had an average of 2 a day during team week, and then the very last one is called the long walk at the very end. So there's plenty of opportunity that you find to realize, like, while you're going through it, is this really for me? My strategy on all this was literally as simple as it sounds. I told myself, if I make it through, I'm gonna make it through this, and then I'll quit then. And I literally just kept saying that over and over again. I'll make it through this, and then I'll quit. I'll make it through this, then I'll quit. And that got me through the whole thing.
So when you said to me 9 times you thought about quitting, were you just plucking a number and saying you'd felt close, or were there sort of specific points when you thought, I'm actually going to do it now? Or do you think you really weren't that close? Was it?
I was going to let my body pretty much dictate if I was or not. As long as my legs were moving and I was going the right direction, my whole intent was, if I break down, then that's the end of it. If I make it through, I'll reevaluate from there. And after I made it through, and that mentality kind of, I'll quit after this one, it served as more of a motivational thing, kind of like, mind game within yourself. Make it through this, then you're allowed to quit. It was more of a mental challenge than anything else, because once I actually did that the first and second time, I realized I can keep this mentality and keep pushing through. And then once I get done with it and I look back, I'm like, hey, I'm actually good. All right, I don't need to quit, and just move over to the next one.
So it's like a technique you've taught yourself on the hoof to get yourself through and stuck with it. And so
Exactly.
you said earlier, so graduation, that's when you get your Green Beret, is it then?
Yes, sir.
And this is the thing when we have the SAS and SBS over here, but everyone knows about the Green Beret, world famous. Obviously, John Rambo is probably the most famous fictional one, but it's known all around the world. So what was that? What age are you at this point? You got your Green Beret?
So selection was actually the first 3 weeks, and then I was actually so once you actually make the Special Forces Assessment Selection, which is actually a little bit unique than all the other ones, because you can make it through all the events, all the times, everything, and then during team week, it's the only special operations course where you can actually get peered out. So out of that 458 that started, we finished with 153, and out of those, it was actually supposed to be, I think, 188, 189, something like that. But we actually had 31 people that were peered out. So their team basically voted them out. Because
okay, so that voted out by your peers, that is peered out.
Yeah.
And why do they do that? Why do they do that?
Because you're working in very austere conditions for most part, and working with your team in a very tight area. Everyone has to be able to trust each other and to cover each other without having to, hey, I need you to get this done. You need to be able to trust that person's going to do it. So this gives everybody a very good understanding that your team is everything you have. And you guys have to be able to play well with others, is how they put it. So once you actually get done with selection, you go through the qualification course. It depends on the area that you're going to and your specific job duty. So for me, was I was an 18 Bravo Special Forces weapons sergeant, and my language was Arabic. But you have people that were could have the same weapons for Special Forces weapons sergeant, but they took Spanish, or Korean or Russian. So their languages also dictate how long the course is as well. Spanish being much shorter, Arabic, Russian, those Chinese definitely take longer. So I spent another year, it was about 18 months, 19 months. And then after that, after the Q course, and the Q course actually has small unit tactics, which is 9 weeks, SEER, which is survival, evasion, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape, which is basically like you're end up in a POW camp and how to blast through that. Then you have your language course, or excuse me, your MOS course, which is, for me, was Special Forces Weapons Sergeant. So that was 3 months. Then you have your language. For me, language was 6 months. And then you have Robin Sage, which is a cumulative exercise that you do at the very end, where you have like a mock team in a mock area doing missions and so forth. Once you do that, then you graduate.
Does everyone do a language?
Yes.
And what level do you have to get to?
You have to show, basically it's called 111 proficiency. So reading, comprehension, and writing. And it's just a basic understanding of the knowledge. You can pursue to actually go more. Most of the guys don't have time to, because there's so many other schools that you do once you get done. And then the remote areas that we went to, we even brought an interpreter from Baghdad on some of our missions when we were in Iraq, to meet up with another interpreter that was in the area, because the dialect has been so different that even the person from Baghdad could barely understand.
Oh, really?
It was one of those things where you do need to have it so you have a basic comprehension, but we do have an interpreter to make sure that we don't miss anything and it doesn't get lost in translation.
But they give you a functional level so you can use it in the field. Exactly. Another thing he said was what to do if you're in a POW camp. What are the basic rules of once you're caught? What are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to survive it?
Yeah. So that was actually, SEER is one of the best and worst course that I've been to. It was one of the hardest, but it was also the one that I actually learned the most. And it was it really kind of struck a chord, because at the very end of it, I think one of the biggest things was we went through days where we were. So actually, first they teach you, how to evade, how to hunt, how to create snares, how to create flotation divides out of your rucks, all these different things to survive out in the wilderness. And then they put you out and you have to make it from point A to point B to meet with your auxiliary. They're going to take you to another point. So when you're on the run, you're trying to stay on the run as long as you can. Now, what's unique about the Q course is that they had a state prison that was about 50, 60 miles away. And they did joint exercises, meaning they had the state prison guards, where their scenario was they had a group of escaped convicts and they were trying to track us down. So they got an exercise out of that, really good training from it. And our mission was, we're behind enemy lines. We have to make it past this point to be able to survive. And so they had helicopters, they had dog teams, they had, search parties. And this way you actually can utilize everything that you were taught, the week prior. But at the end, everybody gets caught. That's the whole point of it. But you're trying to stay out there as long as you can. Now, once you get to the POW camp, they do everything from sleep deprivation, You've been on the run for 5 days anyway, so you're pretty much, haven't eaten. And when I went through was in February. It was just stupid cold. It was ice everywhere, and they just give you scrubs and the boots that you have without the laces or the insoles. So from the time you're there, you're always cold, you're always miserable. They're always keeping you up. They always have like playing on the microphone, babies crying, a little girl screaming, oh, daddy, I want you home. Signs everywhere, work to live to work. So they really play it off really well. It's a really good program, and you really get immersed into this whole thing, especially when you haven't slept in 4 or 5 days, or the sleep that you have is in a concrete box that's 3 feet by 3 feet, so it's enough to where you can bend over and stretch your legs, but you can never stand up, and the floor is freezing, so you never really get to sleep. And in the middle of the time of that, they're pulling you out, they're interrogating you, having you do rake sand, just things to just keep you monotonous, constantly working. And at the end of this was probably the hardest part was we had 3 Vietnam era prisoners of war, and hearing what they had to say, it really, because literally we just went through just days of what they went through, and they're talking about years, and the real thing made you really feel tiny, just and the amount of mental fortitude that they had to endure years of this was just it was just incredible.
So they do that at the end. So you've gone through your days of kind of mock torture and stuff, and then you go and talk to these real guys. You may have spent, I don't know, years there, some of them.
And some I think one guy that the shortest time we talked to was about he was there 15 months. Another guy was there for, I think the longest, I think, was 46, 47 months.
Jesus.
And then hearing their stories, and it just gives you the whole sense of pride and understanding of the sheer will that, people can have to, survive. It was just incredible to hear their stories, and you have a whole new appreciation, for, not just other veterans, but you can kind of imagine, it gives you not even I wouldn't even say a taste, but, it gives you an understanding. That's pretty much about it, but it's one that actually stays with you to where you can certainly appreciate what they've gone through.
Yeah, I can imagine. Had you been out to Iraq as part of the regular army and special forces, or only special forces?
No, my first deployment was with SF. When I first got in, 95, they were really drawing down excuse me, in Bosnia and Sarajevo. Somalia had been a few years prior, so you had a few people that were there during that time frame, but there really wasn't anything going on. And then after 9/11, so I actually got out. I was in the reserves while I was going to school, but after 9/11, I worked my way back so I could actually get in the fight.
And what was it like when you finally got out there?
When I got back from deployment, or got done with the military?
Well, I was meaning when you were done, when you got your Green Beret, and then you went out to Iraq.
It was overwhelming. Honestly, it was at first. So I graduated. I went back home, took care of some things that I had to do. I went back, signed into groups, signed into battalion. On the 3rd day, I was on a flight. I met my team downrange. And one of the hardest things to deal with was, the day that I got in, I literally didn't even have a weapon assigned to me, and they just said, "Hey, grab that the weapon, the kit in the cubby." It was from one of the guys that got shot. there was still blood on it, and it was so, and I was rolling out, so I didn't know the names of the guys. I was still trying to, get familiarized with, my surroundings and the people that I was working with, and went out that night. I mean, I was pretty much support. I was just driving, or I was gunning the first couple of weeks. Actually, the first week. After that, I was already starting to do operations.
So you said overwhelming. You just kind of dropped straight into it, and you were seeing death and bloodshed before you'd even got outside, sort of thing. And so, I mean, it's hard for the rest of us who, probably swanning around, maybe going to university freshers week or something like this. It's hard to imagine being out, because you're still young, right? At this point, you were early 20s by this stage, were you?
No. So at this point, by the time I got to Iraq, I was 30.
Oh, you're 30 by this stage. Okay. Yeah. But still, I mean, seeing things as a kid, but seeing things as a 30-year-old doesn't make it any easier, I guess.
No, it was just, like I said, going from, 0 to 100 within 24 hours, of landing in country. That was the overwhelming part. And I think it was the first two, there were a couple of pot shots here and there. I think by the third mission, we already started kind of getting to little firefights. The fourth one, it was one of my earlier ones, and it's just one of the stories that kind of sticks out in my head all the time. I just remember, going into about, when you're on the target road, we kind of announce at target road, we're about, a block away, usually 1 minute out. And we're already hearing pings on the vehicle, where, people are taking these pot shots by the time we get in. By the time we get there, it's becoming more lively. Stepped out of the vehicle within like 2-3 steps. I remember it was my left foot, and I just remember seeing like a spark where a round had hit, and then right over my head there was like a crack of a whip. So it just went like one hit the ground and then looked over, and then one hit cracked over my head. And I kind of froze, and it was a very odd feeling, because I'd been trying to do so much, and I wasn't sure like what part of my training do I apply right here. Do I follow the stack that's going in? Do I go provide support? Do I take these guys out? And so I was like, well, what do I do? And then one of the guys that ended up being my senior weapons sergeant, kind of that guided me through, Walker, he comes in the back and starts running forward, and he's shooting at where we're taking fire at. And he starts yelling, "I'm going to come at you like a spider monkey, boy," and keeps cracking jokes. And then Buddy Todd comes in and goes, "Shake and bake, motherfuckers," and just starts shooting away. I'm like, we're in the middle of a goddamn firefight, and here these guys are fucking cracking jokes. And for some reason, just that kind of like put me back in a situation in my mind where, if it's going to happen, if I'm going to get hit, I'm not going to know. And if these guys are so comfortable, just cracking jokes in the middle of a mission, why am I being held back? For some reason, it dawned on me, and everything that was like, out of focus and shady and just kind of like zoomed in, all of a sudden I knew exactly what to do, where to go, how to handle it. Jump in that sack, just help them out. It was, and that actually stayed with me every deployment after that. So it was a huge development for me to learn in combat, the mental aspect of it. And it stayed with me for every mission, every deployment after that.
So do you mean, when you say, you talk about that mental aspect of it being a coping mechanism, of taking it lightly and joking around a little bit?
Knowing that you have something to do, you're there for a reason. And the other reasons that are the other variables or the other actions that are happening around you, everything else that's going around you is irrelevant. You need to get from point A to point B. What's happening between that, fuck it, go through it and make it. And having the guys that had so much experience, previous deployments and, hundreds of missions already under the belt, they were going through it like it was a job, and when you have, guys at the shop and, a mechanic or whatever, people cracking jokes, same thing. So it brought it back to a reality for me, because I guess the whole time I'm thinking, that these are Titans, Supermen that, are doing these battles, and I was there with them, and then, kind of my confidence grew. But my mental, the clarity is one thing that is probably the hardest thing to articulate. That happened. It was just for some reason, everything just focused in. It was a very unique experience.
So you're kind of getting sent out to do things that require a more surgical touch. Is that basically how you describe what the Special Forces mission is? It's something that, a particular mission, some. So is that my computer talking or yours?
Yeah, I'm turning mine off. Sorry about that.
No, I don't know. Mine's trying to tell me something as well. I'll get back if it asks me again. I'll get back to it. They say, yeah. So it's kind of surgical missions compared to what the regular army is doing. Because in terms of a percentage of it's a tiny number of you in Special Forces compared to the regulars, right?
Very. So we weren't the unit I was with was it wasn't a traditional Special Forces unit or team. So even in Special Forces, we have certain teams designated certain missions. We have everything from Halo teams, dive teams, scuba, maritime ops, mountain teams. And the team that I was with, or the unit that I was with, was specifically for direct action hostage rescue, counterterrorism, counterinsurgency. So the whole cool thing, the horses and riding a horseback, never got to do that. I never got to go to Afghanistan. What we did was specific, getting intel on high value targets within Iraq, targeting primarily Al Qaeda and the facilitators of Al Qaeda. And we'd have a target package. We'd go in, snatch them up, and bring them back, for questioning, or take them out, however is needed. So mine was strictly kicking indoors, going after guys, coming back out, in and out very fast. We weren't designed to stay out there long. We'd have an average between 25 to 30 people, 5 trucks, heavily armed, because we knew we were going to be, getting into a fight. But we weren't designed to stay in a sustained, long, 6-7 hour firefight. We're just not designed for that. Go in, do a fast hit, hard hit, get what we need, and then exfil.
What's the most surprising thing you've ever found the other side of a door when you've kicked it in?
I think probably one of the hardest things to accept was one of the missions that we're on. We had tracked him down to the 2nd floor, and he was using his family as a shield, hiding behind them. So we had a woman and then 3 kids on the bed, and he was hiding behind them. And we had working dogs with us. So there were Belgian Malinois, ours Gizmo. And I think that was also one of the most amazing things too, is realizing how smart those dogs were. Because the instant fear that I had was that dog being released and then going after the first ones nearby, which would have been the women and children. And I was scared to death about that because they were in fear. But that dog literally just leaped right over the bed and right to the guy that was, holding the weapon. But it was one of those things where, you know, it was heart dropping, because it just seemed like it was gonna be like a really bad scenario. But luckily it actually turned out to be great, and come find out that that person actually was just acting to be, they basically had, one of the actions that they do a lot was they'd go in, they'd actually take over the house and say, either they would, you know, kick out the person if they're lucky, or they just kill them, say, I'm your husband, anyone comes ask, I'm the father, blah, blah, blah. So they could systematically place themselves in different positions within the community, without people really realizing it. So come to find out, this was one of those situations. So it was actually, a double surprise. So it kind of worked out in our favor.
How long do you spend with the dogs? So they train, and they're trained to not, can't really tell bad guys, but they go for the guy with a weapon, do they?
And that was, I'm not a dog handler, but what I'd seen is, I mean, they're wicked smart, and they do go off of that. But I think when they were explaining is that when you have like a accelerated heart rate, you know, there's hormones that get released in your body, and the dogs can smell it. And I think that was the reason why I went after that person instead. Don't quote me on this. This is, you know, like I said, from hearing in past conversations, you know, 15 years ago. But they do know exactly who to go after. So that was the only thing that I need to actually do some research on that, because that was something that was really unexpected.
That's amazing. I've seen some videos of those dogs. What do you call them? Belgian Malamars, are they? Incredible what they can do, because they're not the biggest, are they? But
they have and they're wicked smart, and they pinpoint and really have a good understanding of what they need to do, and they live for it. They love that. You can't wait to like release them in the house.
One subject to another, if I can. So you joined up for the army at 19, and then special forces in Iraq at 30. But did your martial arts, it must have started when you were a kid, before the army, or?
Kind of, sort of. Actually started while I was in the army. It was the first time I can actually spend some time to go and research and test out different types. So for probably a solid year and a half, I tried out everything from Wing Chun to Kuk Sool Won, Taekwondo, karate, Ocean Ryu, karate. And the thing that happened was I'd give it a chance. I tried 3-4 months. And then anytime we were doing sparring, at the time I was also about 145 pounds. So I was really skinny. And someone that would outweigh me, just sheer athleticism and power, would beat me hands down. So I went from one to another until I actually found a place that was doing Brazilian ground fighting. And there was a guy that was there that was smaller than me, a little bit shorter. And I was thinking to myself, finally, someone smaller than me, I can finally beat up on somebody, you know? And I meant that as a sense where I'm not going to be the tool, you know, that I always constantly was. And so I started in his guard, and he caught me in an armbar. All right, I got this. And tried again, got me again. I was like, so I had to ask him, I'm like, listen, how did you do that? And he's like, well, don't really know. I've only been here 2 weeks. So he tapped me out like 4 times in one round, and smaller than me, and only been there for 2 weeks. That's it. So that was my moment where this is going to be it for me. So I started at Fort Hood, at a rinky-dink place, not very legitimate, but that got me started. and then I started trying to, expand. So while I was on active duty, I continued going. I got off active duty. I was going to school, not only continue training, but I decided to leave the school I was at and transfer from Southwest Texas State University, University of Texas at Arlington, which is about 6 hours north, just so I could train with Carlos Machado. So I literally moved my whole life so I could actually train. And I stayed with him and continued training until I left back to North Carolina for Special Forces in 2004.
In 2004 is when you got your black belt, right?
Yes.
And first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in the Special Forces, is that right?
And yep.
And because I think this is something I've this question has come up a lot since talking to military guys. I think people kind of assume that they all do a lot of martial arts already, but it sounds like you were teaching them Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Is that how? Because you ended up teaching a lot of different things in Special Forces, but a lot of it was martial arts based. Is that right?
Yes.
So prior to you being there and being an elite jiu-jitsu practitioner, what was the martial arts training? Was it kind of rifle butts and bayonets and the sort of last ditch?
It was
I've
called.
not put it well, but
No. You put it perfectly well. And it had to do with it was a little bit archaic. A lot of like grab the groin, twist, pull, stomp on the toes type. It was just very dated. And no one really took it seriously. This was around the same time frame, the early days, that the MACP program came out, which is Modern Army Combatives Program. And I believe that there could have been like a great program. The problem with it is that they watered it so down to make it fit within the program of the Army. It just got diluted so much that within a few years it just went away. And let me rephrase that. It didn't go away. It's still being taught. But the legitimacy of it was kind of lost. Basically, they were teaching arm bars in 3 moves. Grab the arm, put your leg around, and extend your hips. And I think the worst part of it is the way they actually had the level certification. The way it was pitched was, by the time you're MACP level 4, you're like a blue belt, which is completely untrue. But it was pitched that way. So they would have, for example, combatives level 1. I believe it was like 1 week or 2 weeks, something like that. And once you actually get your level 1, that qualified you to do level 2. Once you did level 2, you're qualified to teach level 1. So it's not even a white belt. It's somebody who had 2 weeks of training that's now training you. So by the 3rd and 4th, they're teaching you more how to organize tournaments and, how to, hold these programs within your unit and to schedule time with the gym. So there was the aspect of training and repetition and staying consistent was lost. There wasn't any emphasis that this is a very perishable skill, that you have to stay on it. It has to be done on a regular basis, and people weren't treating it. So it kind of got lost. The efficiency of it. It then developed into what I designed was specifically for my unit. I came up with a program called SOC-UC, Special Operations Close Quarters Combatives, but it didn't really incorporate all jiu-jitsu. It was literally about 20% jiu-jitsu, about 40% Muay Thai, and then manipulation of the weapon system and sling with your kit on, and how to maneuver off the ground so you can get back on your feet with kit on in a situation like that. So that one thing that's kind of surprising to a lot of people, saying that I didn't put that much jiu-jitsu in it, because in a combat situation, that should be your absolute last resort. You're always trying to get back to your weapon system, your primary, your secondary, your knife, and then the very last resort is bare hands. So what I taught was mainly, weapon retention, how to get your weapon back or not get it taken, how to take shots from like a guard position, and to be able to stand back up, maneuvering on top, for example, having to pin somebody down while you can draw your weapon, just in case someone's coming at you. So it's more scenarios like that, than kind of sport related. That was just for my unit though. That was toward around the same time that I was leaving, so I never got to really expand on it.
Okay. So I guess it's two things. So it's, as a martial art, I guess it's, if you've been grabbed, in jiu-jitsu it's grappling based for anyone that doesn't know, but once you've been grabbed, something's already gone very wrong. So there's
Yes.
that. So it's weapon retention. But I guess there's the other aspect, which is it's good for you to do generally, because all round fitness, as you say, being able to get up from the floor. So I guess, were you, when you were out with your unit, were you training them in what would look like a normal jiu-jitsu class to us, and then also, if they wanted, but also adapting aspects for the combatives? Yeah. Is that?
So I was trying to get people involved in it was very much kind of like the 90s mentality of, trying to convince people, what jiu-jitsu is and how efficient it was. So like, you're going to be rolling around with other guys on the ground. It just, it doesn't sound appealing. It doesn't sound, they'd rather learn how to punch and kick. But once, I got a couple of people hooked on it while I was in, and then that kind of started spreading around, and like, oh, you should try it out. And then once it came from a couple of people, one more person joined in. But it's a great way to learn a new skill set, to stay in shape, and give you that mental mindset of trying to figure out different situations and what to do in different scenarios. And let's say worst case scenario, it gives you the ability to be able to figure out what you need to do to at least get back up on your feet, right? So worst case scenario, how do you go from guard, push off the hips, do a technical stand up, and then you're back on your feet, ready to go. You can draw. But there's always benefit to it. And that's what I was, trying to pitch. But a lot of people, too wrapped up in Hollywood, they want the, 1, 2, you're done. Or one of the big things that was happening around then was the whole, what was that one? People were like pitching and trying to sell Krav Maga, like, I'll teach you how to do this once and you'll never forget it. It'll be instinct. The most utter bullshit was just coming out of the word book. But if you're a good salesman, you can pitch it and people will buy on it, right? And then they would say, well, you're not doing it right if it fails. For anyone that's been in martial arts, longer than a year, understands, that something to become natural takes thousands of repetitions, in the same situation repeatedly, to understand all the variables that are actually included into that. Because, if you punch straight, and then all of a sudden your target raises and you still punch straight, you're never going to hit your target, right? So you have to be able to adapt to different situations, different weight, different environments. And that's one thing that I really wanted to emphasize with my guys in the room. I'd throw in, some furniture, that was, we actually had like padded furniture that we used at shoot houses that I really thought was really good for that. Because even for jiu-jitsu guys, you throw in a couch and a coffee table, in an enclosed room where you don't have all the room to go. What are you going to do then? So realistic.
I always find that strange in jiu-jitsu when you're rolling and people come up against the wall and they're like, oh, hold on, we'll reset. And I think, well, yeah, fair enough if you want to make it like a competition, but the world has walls and stuff in it, doesn't it? So you shouldn't automatically want a sort of endless expanse to roll around in. I think people do forget that jiu-jitsu is a martial art sometimes.
and creating those scenarios. So it's kind of like the whole, elevator fight scene. Try and use your jiu-jitsu in the elevator, see how that works out. you know and it's not just to disprove anything, it's literally just to get your mindset ready for that type of environment. Um and if you've been down enough missions, there's some houses that are literally spotless. They're kind of affluent area, or and you can literally navigate through room after room without having to worry about anything. You have some places that are complete. I mean, there's trash on the floor, you're slipping and sliding everywhere, they got leaks over there, it's slippery. So all these things have to be taken into account when you're doing a mission. The walls in the area. When I'm teaching like guys that are doing sport, yes, I tell them to stop, get away from the wall. But the guys that I'm teaching, especially like law enforcement, use the wall, walk up it, use it to push yourself off, and getting them ready for that same scenario. And I always, have them, put their like a fake gun on their side to make sure, like when you're standing up, you're not exposing that your weapon, your primary weapon, for it to get taken. When you're trying to fight somebody, you want to make sure that hip's on the ground away from them so they can't grab it easily. Little things like that are going to be very applicable to law enforcement, not so much to sport. So my main class is sport, self-defense, not much combat and law enforcement related. I separate things from that.
I want to ask you, I asked you about this when we spoke before, but I'd like to ask you again, if you don't mind, to share it with a wider audience. And it's a thing that marries up these two sides, the military and the martial arts. So you started a charity called the We Defy Foundation. And it all stemmed from a guy coming into your gym. Is that right?
Yes.
So I think if I remember it correctly, he came in. This was an injured veteran, and he came in asking into your martial arts gym in Texas, asking for help, not for himself, but for his daughter. Is that right?
Yes.
So yeah. So and what was his demeanor like when he came to you?
So I've been kind of accustomed dealing with amputees. Just you see it a lot. So when he came in, the first thing he was doing was trying to vet me. I guess what I found out later is that he'd been online. He saw, because the name that I started out with was Tier 1 training facility. And he was just like, oh, this guy's Tier 1, thinks he's dumb, badass. I'm going to go check this out, see where he's at. So literally the first 20 minutes was just him firing back and forth. Like, oh yeah, so, you call the place Tier 1, why is that? I'm like, oh, I used to be in 3rd Special Forces Group at Bragg. And so once he kind of got past that, he was like, well, I was at Bragg too. I was like, really? So he was with 18 Corps. He was with 82nd. He was in MP, lost both his legs and his right arm in an IED. And he was strictly trying to find a place that he felt comfortable taking his daughter. At the end of the conversation, I just kind of threw it out there. You ever try, any martial arts yourself? He's like, yeah, well, before the ID, he was 6'2", so he was actually a tall guy. He actually did stand up, but never did jiu-jitsu. And he tried jiu-jitsu when he was in North Carolina after, to see if that was something he could do. And he literally he described the worst experience. The guys were more than willing to take my money, but when for example, we're covering like full mount, they didn't want to spend any time kind of assisting me on that. It was just kind of like figure it out. So it was really frustrating to hear that. And I told him, you know what, if you're patient with me, I'll be patient with you. It's the first time I'm doing this. But I'm willing to give it a shot if you can be patient with me, because I've never done this. So literally that weekend, I went home, I wrote down about 8 pages, a little book like this, so front and back, different techniques that he could try, something that, work on his angle. But I needed to find out like where his base was, because when you're an amputee, they take the muscle flap and they put it over the titanium rod that's a femur. So he could roll over it. He just couldn't stay on it very long because that would put pressure and start hurting his leg. How far can that reach? His left arm was damaged, so he can't rotate it all the way, but he did have a grip on that. So all these different things. And then I had to scrap about 6 pages of it, and I started with just 2 pages. And we just kept going from there. And I told him, we did 1 hour. It was just privates one-on-one. And, I'd say, hey, I'll see you Thursday. Okay. All right, come in Thursday. And then we start working on some more and kind of see where's more limitations are, what can we expand on? And I kept kind of like, okay, we'll see you Tuesday, right? See you on Tuesday. I will send you a reminder. He'd say, okay. So he was a little bit hesitant at first. And then once he started kind of understanding that, be honest with you, I was excited about it too, because this was after 18, 19 years doing jiu-jitsu. It's still jiu-jitsu related, but it was completely different. The leverage was different. The center base was different. How can you, manipulate this to do it with one arm? How can you use the advantage of his other arm? How can we, strategy, tactics? It was so overwhelming, but such a challenge. I was so into it. Yeah, I still am, because it's something entirely different that got me really excited. Kind of like, kindled up those, the initial fire, and feeding off of him, because he was excited to come back. He's like, hey, I tried this today. It took a few months for him to get comfortable doing the group class, but once he got into the group class, he just didn't want to leave. So it worked out really well. He lost weight. He had goals. He wanted to start competing. He started lifting weights. He dropped like 36 pounds. His entire, the way he lived life changed. And to this day, I still remember, the conversation we had in the court on the mats, going, man, if this worked out so well for you, I mean, I'll be honest with you, it worked out really well for me, because I had like homework at home and I was looking forward to this the next day and trying to figure this out. Imagine how many other people could benefit from that. And so that's how we actually started it all. And it was a rough couple of years, because neither one of us started a nonprofit. We really didn't know what to do and how to go about raising money. And we were really nervous about, how the money was spent and getting audited. And this was on the same time frame where Wounded Warrior Project caught a lot of heat, because I believe it was something like 80% was going to the employees and only like 20% was going to the veterans. And to this day, we have no more than 20% is going back to the foundation, but we do have expenses. So, and we have to get t-shirts printed up. We have to pay photographers and, different things like that. But everybody is volunteer. Everyone that's on the board is volunteer. Everyone that's an ambassador is volunteer. So we get to put more soldiers to the program. Just found out last week we put over, we just hit the 500 mark. So we've been able to put 500 veterans to the program. We have over, I think, 600 affiliates, and it's growing drastically. And the international support, once Sam Sheriff was took on and started developing Reorg as a mirror image of We Defy, I mean, he has done such a spectacular growth with this. And I mean, we had to take notes from him. I mean, it was just doing so well. And then he was, be able to influence, the veterans grappling in Australia. And they took, the Reorg model, which was, phenomenal. It worked out. And, I'm starting to work with Canada now. So it's something where everyone's seeing the benefits, everyone's seeing the psychological benefits, the physical benefits. And I hope it just continues to grow.
Well, it's a massive inspiration to us over here, because seeing what you guys have done and the response that we get to Reorg over here is incredible. When you do, I do jiu-jitsu. I'm in my mid-40s, late 40s, so I got that wrong. And I had my own injuries that could well have stopped me doing all sport. And so people that know me say, "Oh, how come you can do jiu-jitsu?" And I just send them a video of Mark Ormerod, a triple amputee over here, who trains jiu-jitsu every day, and say, well, you know, what's your excuse? Because everyone's got something, haven't they? A bad knee or something, and you know, and then when they find out what Reorg does and what We Defy does, you know, often sponsoring people, sometimes who found themselves in a pretty bad situation, and giving them something that gets them training again and can just be that spark to really change their life. So no, we're very grateful to what you're doing, because it's a great inspiration.
Oh, thank you. Honestly, I don't think we would be able to reach the level we have without Reorg together. Honestly, not, because believe it or not, we've actually had some people that we started talking about it and they're like, oh, like Reorg. We're like, exactly, like absolutely right. You know, one of the biggest fans of Reorg is actually down in Austin, Wes Whitlock, who owns Rogue American Apparel. He was a Marine, a U.S. Marine, and I didn't know Wes, but he knew Reorg.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
To him, you know, and that's where that came up. And he's like, yeah. And we had a group of the ambassadors come in, you know, wanted to host him down in Austin. Everyone had a great time, but you know, he's a big time supporter. He created some of the shirts, rash guards. But that's how big y'all have grown, you know, and, you know, to be able to say, yeah, we're not directly related, we're indirectly related in a big way. But we have the same mission. And, you know, so y'all's work is working over the ocean, and it's phenomenal. So keep doing what y'all doing, and it's going to blow up even more.
Oh, amazing. Well, thanks so much. And Alan, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
And for your patience. And we'll keep doing what we can over here, and you keep doing what you can over there, and we'll stay in touch.
Absolutely.
All the best. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir.
Cheers.